Welcome, weary travellers, to the third annual Shock-Phobia Fest in the year of our Dark Lord 2021. 'Tis I, your host, the ever amoral, the ever spine-chilling Spider Dan, giving you forewarning, for ye who listen here, this particular recording took place last Hallows Eve in the year that dare not speak its name, where it became lost to time, until recently unearthed. So, if this recording is aged poorly, that is where the true horror begins.
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle.
Shock-Phobia Fest. Welcome to Prattle World. I'm your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to Shock-Phobia Fest, a month-long celebration of All Hallows Eve's most frightening films and comic spooks. Right, welcome back guys, and happy Halloween to everybody out there. Hope you're having a good one, enjoying some spooky films and freaky fun, whatever that may be. But it's great to be back. We're here with another themed season, carrying it on again with another entry. This time I'm running solo, and I'm going to list my top favourite jack-o'-lantern characters. So this isn't just, pumpkins that have come alive or things like that. These are people or beings that have visual design. They basically have a pumpkin or gourd or whatever you want to call it as a head. And this kind of comes from kind of way back when, where kind of Hallows Eve was, the festival of Samhain or Samhain. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I know it's not Samhain, but that's how it's spelt. Samhain. Anyway, so we're going to celebrate those kind of characters. So I've kind of avoided any kind of scarecrow characters, because sometimes those kind of come within the same kind of... They're almost labelled very similarly, but I might do that next year possibly and look at some scarecrow characters. But the legend that it comes from mostly is a tale and a myth. I mean, the whole Halloween kind of tradition and festival comes from Irish myth and Irish folklore, kind of celebrating the time of the year slowly starting to get a bit darker and nights grow longer and to be a bit more kind of cautious during the kind of night time, but kind of celebrate. There's various kind of traditions and folklore around it, and various different tales. So I'd like to talk about first, before I get started, I want to talk about the legend of Stingy Jack. So obviously there's various different, with most legends and myths, especially stuff like Greek myths, there's various changes and various kind of different versions of them that have appeared over time. So this is kind of just a kind of a brief kind of overview of that one legend. But according to legend, Stingy Jack was a miserly, drunken and thoroughly unpleasant old man who lived in Ireland long ago. Jack is said to have met and gotten the better of the devil twice during his lifetime. On the first occasion, he made the devil promise to leave him alone for 7 years. On the second occasion, Jack made the devil promise never to take his soul. When Jack eventually died, he was not allowed into heaven because of his wickedness. Desperate for somewhere to stay, Jack went down to hell. However, the devil reminded Jack of his promise never to take his soul, telling Jack to go back where he came from, effectively to become a wandering ghost. Jack protested, and it was nighttime on Earth, and he would not be able to see where he was going. The devil tossed him a lump of coal from the fires of hell. Jack put it into a turnip that he had been eating, making the world's first jack-o'-lantern. Ever since that day, Jack's spirit has been travelling the world, using his jack-o'-lantern to light his way, always looking for a place to stay, but never finding one. You can basically look it up and see the kind of differences and the various details, but that's basically the story, to kind of sum it up in a short kind of form. And that's kind of where we kind of get this legend, and we kind of get the image of someone having a jack-o'-lantern, a pumpkin for a head. For example, I think the more kind of most kind of famous version of this is the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, where often the headless horseman is depicted, instead of having a head, to have a kind of flaming jack-o'-lantern, a flaming pumpkin head as such, and in replace, I think the Disney version kind of he has that as well. He has the kind of flaming pumpkin to kind of showcase, kind of gives him the absence of the head is scary, but I think adding that kind of flaming pumpkin design has always been quite iconic. It's been used in various kind of media that we're going to kind of talk about. To be on this list, what I've decided is the requirement, at the very least, is that in some form these characters must have the visage of a pumpkin as a pumpkin for a head, be it a mask, be it that their face kind of resembles a pumpkin, or they have a literal pumpkin head. So without further ado, let's get going. So my very first inclusion in my top 5 is going to be a character called Ichabod Clay, obviously based on Ichabod Crane. So this character is from the video game series Clay Fighter. Now, if you're not familiar with Clay Fighter, it was kind of a parody video game, parodying the most popular kind of video games at that time, like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, those type of things. Also made fun of kind of popular movies as well. For the first sequel, they called it C2 Judgment Clay, and that was after the Terminator franchise and their sequel. But all these characters were made out of clay and were actually animated in the stop motion style, much like the Aardman Studios or the Aardman Animation, kind of very much like kind of Wallace and Gromit, or Nightmare Before Christmas, that kind of thing. So yeah, and the premise, the kind of story behind Clay Fighter and the series of games was that a mysterious clay meteorite came and it hit an amusement park and brought all the kind of various kind of characters and attractions to life at this abandoned amusement park. So you had like there's a character called Taffy, who is like the taffy machine brought to life. Bad Mr. Frosty, which are kind of the Christmas costumes and things like that within the amusement park itself. But yeah, very simple premise, but the games are really quite funny, and there was a lot of humour involved. My favourite out of the bunch of the characters was Ichabod Clay, and he kind of reminds me a little bit like Jack Skellington from Nightmare Before Christmas. It's that kind of character. I know I'm not including Jack Skellington on this list because he is the Pumpkin King, but he has a skeletal head, so also not going to include Pumpkinhead, which is a very famous horror franchise, but the character does not have a pumpkin for a head, even if it does resemble that. But yeah, he was a really interesting character, very kind of, he's almost like a ghost, and I believe that the clay meteor kind of opened a portal somewhat for that character to go through and to go into the real world and to kind of try and take over this amusement park where all these other characters that came to life are kind of fighting for supremacy to take over this amusement park. Can't remember what it was called, but there you go. Ichabod Clay is very much, he's all about scaring people, very Halloween themed. That's all he wants to do is scare and just strike fear into the hearts of everything living or every clay creation out of this video game. But I used to really love these as a kid, these games. They were really fun, and they were I think they were a way for kids to basically have a video game that wasn't as violent. These non-human characters, they literally can't, even if they were killed, they're not really human. So you can tear them apart and destroy them. There was a clown thing called Bonkers. There was a blob, which was just a lump of clay, and it could do like all sorts of things. Loads of different weird and wacky characters in there. Various different games and various different kind of newer characters would come into them. But he had some really interesting kind of powers as well. Ichabod Clay. He's got this kind of, again, he's kind of this spectral being, this spooky being. He could teleport. He could throw kind of flaming fireballs. He could throw his own head as a kind of projectile weapon. And he also had, obviously making fun of the Street Fighter franchise, he had the Boo Hooken, which is obviously a take on the Hadouken uppercut from the Street Fighter games. So quite a very bad pun, but you could also conjure bats as well, which is pretty cool. So very kind of Halloween themed, very spooky kind of character. I'm pretty sure you can get a version of these on kind of an emulator. You could download them if you want to play them again. But I really enjoyed these games. They were kind of a fun thing to play on the SNES or the Mega Drive back in the day. I'm really showing my age now, but I do recommend the Clay Fighter series and Ichabod Clay as a character. So moving on to the next one. I wanted to have at least one kind of friendly character in this. And I wanted to include a film that was kind of, because this is what the kind of this my season is all about. This season is about kind of Halloween movies, even if they're not necessarily scary, but are they set at Halloween, even ever so slightly? And I have to include Jack Pumpkinhead from the movie Return to Oz and the series of Oz books as well. So this is set on Halloween. It's a very brief mention, but it is set just a little bit before or during Halloween. It's not very clear how much time has passed, but when Dorothy, I mean, this is a dark movie as well. I rewatched this on Disney Plus recently, and it is a freaky movie. It starts off, she's keeps talking about Oz and the amazing friends she made in Oz, and she's all her family think she's insane, think she's crazy. They're paying for her to go off to this mental institution where they're gonna basically electroshock all these weird memories and feelings out of her. And her friend in the asylum brings in a pumpkin and says, "Oh, it's Halloween soon, here you go." And she's like, "All right, very good." But yeah, it's a pretty messed up movie, especially for a kids' film. But I really enjoy it. I've got some. I watched it when I was a kid, and I have some very fond memories. And I posted it on Facebook, and everyone seems to have a lot of fond memories of this movie, even if it did scar them. But I think kids kind of gravitate to darker, more adult storytelling. I think they always have, because it's kind of like, it's maybe this is a bit too old for me, but I'm still going to watch it and enjoy it. I know I was the same as a kid. So, but yeah, this character is like he's probably the character that's most like a scarecrow in this list. Kind of tried to get away with that, but I wanted at least one kind of positive, a good representation of all these pumpkin people. So he's a kind of a sweet, sensitive scarecrow. He wasn't alive prior, but he was brought to life, built by in the film anyway. I know it differs in the book. In the film, he's built by Ozma, the true ruler of Oz, in an attempt to scare off the evil Princess Mombi, but then it doesn't quite work, doesn't quite go to plan. But then Princess Mombi wants to experiment and has this life-giving powder and sprinkles it all over Jack, and brings him to life. He is basically a set of kind of twigs and branches and things, and his pumpkin head has to be changed. I don't know how you would change that, or how he puts his intelligence from one pumpkin head into another, but his intelligence and his consciousness, whatever the rules of that is, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not very familiar with the set of books, but I do find them quite interesting, the adaptations. A very popular character, been adapted several times in cartoons, in comic books, Marvel comic books, you name it. I know his intelligence does vary depending on how many seeds are in the pumpkin at any given time, or how rotten those seeds are. But those are the rules that, Frank L. Baum came up with, so we just got to roll with them. But I do like him. He does have this kind of C-3PO, R2-D2 type relationship with TikTok, who's very kind of, standoffish, almost quite military, and very go-get-em, and Jack's a bit more like, no, well, not really, I'm not sure, I'm quite sensitive about everything. He's so sensitive that he's lost his mum, and Dorothy comes along and he goes, well, I'm going to call you my mum as well, which is kind of a little creepy, but I kind of get it because Ozma was also a little girl when she created him, so it's not like, but it's still a bit weird. It's a bit weird. But it doesn't seem to have any kind of special abilities or anything that interesting going on. I think he's just alive. I have a theory about Return to Oz, that I think Dorothy is still in the mental institution, in the mental asylum. She has undergone the shock therapy, and then it's broken her, and then she's gone and been put down with the rest of the other broken people within the asylum, because you can hear them screaming and the reference to while in the asylum. And I think that all the characters she encounters that are broken or have their own mental impairments and things like that, all the characters throughout the film, I think are the broken people within the asylum. So that's my fan theory, and it has as much length as any, and as much grounding as any fan theory. But that's how I like to see it, because obviously in the first film it's very much like, is it a dream? Isn't it a dream? Could it have been a dream? All that sort of stuff. But yeah, great character, and he becomes very integral at the end of the film, because he is almost responsible somewhat for vanquishing the Gnome King. So very interesting turn of events, but I won't spoil it. Very, very interesting character, very unique character, very soft, very simple character, but he is lovable, and you do kind of get behind him, and you want to see it all turn out all right for him, without any kind of issues and stuff. So yeah, absolutely kind of recommend Jack Pumpkinhead. It almost like when I started compiling this, it was almost a definite inclusion of this list. So yeah, moving on. So Marvel have had a set of characters called the Jack-O-Lantern, or Jack-O-Lantern characters. They're kind of very similar to the Green Goblin, Hobgoblin type characters, and there's a lot of them. There's been a lot of them. So I wanted to choose at least one specific one. All of the different ones. For example, there's one where, they're all great in their own way, all very unique. There's one where there was one of the Jack-O-Lanterns who died and was resurrected after Satan's soul had been split 666 times, and one of those segments had gone into the body of the Jack-O-Lantern who had died in the Civil War, and was brought back and became an enemy of the Ghost Rider, which was a really cool storyline. There's Mad Jack, a female Jack-O-Lantern who was impersonating kind of Mysterio's ghost at the time. Or also, probably one of my favourites as well was the Crime Master's Jack-O-Lantern, who is an evil son of a bitch. And he became the arch-villain of Agent Venom. If you're familiar with that series, as Flash Thompson as Venom. Great series, great villain as well. Highly recommend that. But I'm going to go with the original Jack-O-Lantern, who is Jason Macendale. And he also went on to become one of the longest-running Hobgoblins in the Spider-Man mythos. He was trained by the US Marines, hired by the CIA, who let him go after his methods were proved to be too ruthless and brutal. So then he decided to go out on his own, and the way to kind of promote himself, to market himself, was to come up with a kind of an eye-catching name and an eye-catching costume. That's why he created the Jack-O-Lantern identity. Again, very similar to the Hobgoblin. He has these kind of stylized grenades. He has, a pumpkin for a head, and he also has this what he calls a pogo platform, which can hover and kind of fly, but also it can bounce around. And they can kind of control the bouncing, and it's a pretty devastating weapon, and can disorientate kind of his enemies like Spider-Man and so on. But yeah, it's kind of a unique, but he is, I can see why the character never really took off so well, because he always kind of was sort of a rip-off of the Green Goblin, or sort of a rip-off of, Hobgoblin, any of the various goblins that had been, it's very, very similar. But I like him, and I've kind of always had a kind of soft spot for him. But I mean, again, like, he's pretty skilled, and I'd argue that he was more successful as the Jack-o'-lantern than he would be as the Hobgoblin. But he's an interesting character. I mean, he's already a kind of Olympic level athlete, and you have to be to kind of keep up with all the different kind of superheroes throughout the Marvel universe. If you're not superpowered, you at least have to be, peak physical human condition to keep up with anybody. But he is ever the opportunist. Like, any opportunity to make some money, to get some better weapons, to advance himself in the kind of mercenary world, he will take it. I have to talk about the mask as well, because the mask is probably the most iconic. Now, when I was a kid, for some reason I always thought it was that the flames from his mask were holographic. Turns out no, they are the real flames. So he has small jets kind of around the base of the mask, and they're kind of a flame. They let out flame, but it's kind of a less dense and a lower level kind of temperature flame, kind of like a stage flame. So it's not one that will burn you, but that kind of comes out, and that's a real. So it does produce that, but it also has its own. It's got telescopic vision, infrared. It's also got its own kind of air supply as well, because it would need to, because of the flames. But yeah, it's a fantastic design, fantastic character. But he is, like I said, he is ever the opportunist. When he found out who he believed at the time to be the original Hobgoblin, he hired a group, an international criminal known as the Foreigner, to kill Ned Leeds, who it turns out wasn't the original Hobgoblin, as we find out many years later in the miniseries Hobgoblin Lives. Highly recommend that as well, going along with the kind of origin of the Hobgoblin. Those two kind of collections are really, really strong, and I do recommend them. It kind of sort of tells the whole story in the best kind of possible way, and kind of closes off that kind of original tale as well, and introducing the mystery of the Hobgoblin. He finds out that has him killed, so he doesn't even do the dirty himself, because he's that much of an opportunist. He's like, well, just hire somebody else to do it. And then he adopts the Hobgoblin kind of moniker, the technology. He basically got the gear already, but he takes everything he has and becomes the new Hobgoblin, which is, at this point, I think he's the fourth or third Hobgoblin? Fourth, I'd say, yeah. So he's technically the fourth Hobgoblin at this point already. It gets kind of confusing with the old Hobgoblins, but I do recommend it. Even later on, though, he still is desperate to be better, to improve on himself. He actually makes a deal with a demon during the Inferno crossover, the demon called Nastir, and he actually starts becoming like a demon, becomes almost like a real goblin himself, and is hideous. He doesn't have to wear a mask anymore because he already has this big tongue and these sharp teeth. And he would later be separated from this demonic possession, and this character would take on his own identity, his own life as the Demo Goblin. He's kind of this god-worshipping demon, which is a very bizarre kind of character, but I kind of dug him. He's got a very 90s design as well. Was involved in the Maximum Carnage crossover. Lots of great stuff. But yeah, I would argue that he was more kind of successful as Jack-o'-lantern against Machine Man, Silver Sable, Spider-Man, but then he kind of became the perennial loser Green Goblin. He kind of Hobgoblin, and kind of would always play second fiddle to those kind of previous Hobgoblins, even the original especially. He's always the pretender to the throne. When he got locked up at one point, and then the original Hobgoblin, who had been in hiding since he made Ned Leeds the Hobgoblin, he then killed Macadel for being such a kind of henchman loser, ruining the Hobgoblin name. He killed him. So there you go. And that is the kind of end of his story. But I did like the character, and I enjoy his kind of his run, and his kind of, being the pretender to the throne of the Hobgoblin. But I did always kind of enjoy that character and enjoy the look. I also had like an action figure, so I probably had a bit of a soft spot for it there as well. So yeah, moving on. Sarwain or Samhain or however you want to pronounce it, from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. So the episode he was introduced in was What If Halloween Was Forever? Now, this was written by creator of Babylon 5, the Spider-Man comic scribe, and the Thor movie screenwriter J. Michael Straczynski. So this episode introduced the character, and he was genuinely one of the more creepy, powerful, and memorable antagonists the real Ghostbusters ever had, along with the Sandman and the Boogeyman. And I believe that they were all created by J. Michael Straczynski, and they would give kids nightmares, ruin them. Again, kind of like Return to Oz, quite kind of dark and disturbing, but again, made for some better episodes. So Sarwain is a spirit that encapsulates and is the personification of Halloween, and his plan is to slow time and cover the entire world in eternal night, making Halloween last forever. So he sees all the kind of ghosts and demons and other creatures that he conjures up as his children. You know, established ghosts like Slimer as well. He considers them a creature of the night, and his bidding. He wants them to do his bidding because they're his kind of slaves or children, if you want. But yes, and he basically throughout the episode is trying to consolidate his power, and I think if it gets to midnight on Halloween that the change will be permanent. But his only weakness is light. So obviously the Ghostbusters use that to their advantage to kind of end his reign as the kind of king of Halloween, if you will, a pumpkin king in his own right. But he's an interesting character. He's got a great design. He's got these long, freaky arms and fingers and this kind of brown or purple cloak, depending on the artist's interpretation. But yeah, and he's also got these really weird teeth, these kind of big, kind of large kind of exposed mouth and these big kind of horrible skull-like teeth. But yeah, I love him. I think he's fantastic. A really, really interesting character. So definitely give him a look. I think you can find the episode on YouTube, or I think it was they were on Netflix for a little while, I remember. I'm not sure if they're still there, the episodes, but give him a look, even if it's just an image search. He's pretty darn cool. He also turned up he's very popular, so much so he's turned up in various media for the Ghostbusters, so comic books, IDW comic books, comics, toys. I think he's in the introduction to the Extreme Ghostbusters, though don't think he made an appearance in them. Also, he was part of a Halloween event on the Ghostbusters World mobile game, which was kind of a little bit like Pokemon Go, but with Ghostbusters characters and Ghostbusters kind of ghosts, I guess. I've not played it myself, but I've heard it's okay. Right, coming to number one. Okay, so number one has to be the most ridiculous out of the lot, guys. It's the pumpkin wrapper from the Mighty Morphing Power Rangers. So this character is probably the most infamous and divisive Power Rangers villain of all time. He was introduced in episode 54. Again, this is currently available on Netflix, so go give it a watch. Episode 54 is called Trick or Treat, and again, set on Halloween. Due to the popularity of rap music in the 90s, the producers felt that they needed to be more down with the kids, so they decided to give this villain, this character, for some reason, a rapper and rapping characteristics. Not quite sure why. And again, obviously, with Power Rangers, a lot of the footage is filmed in Japan and then is re-edited and voiced over, and they put their own music on top of it to sell it to the US market. So this is like a previously, an established character in Japan, and they were just like, I don't know what they called him in Japan, or if he rapped in Japan. I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. But yeah, sure. But I kind of don't know why they picked the Halloween monster of all the monsters to give the rapping characteristics to, or a pumpkin. There's nothing really about Halloween or pumpkins that make me think of rap music, So I don't really get it. And surely you would want a positive, character to be your rap-focused have a rap-focused episode. Like, for example, if they introduced a character, like a friend of the Power Rangers who rapped, maybe that would make more sense, but they made the monster villain. I think Rita Repulsa or somebody says that he uses raps to confuse people, but they are awful. They are terrible raps. And that's how the Power Rangers kind of wake him up. They plant the seed. Rita Repulsa's villains kind of plant the seed. And it grows into this big rotten pumpkin patch. Tommy investigates. There's a load of putties he fights, then leaves it, and then guys, it's a bizarre kind of episode, but I love it. It's kind of awful, but I love it at the same time. It's kind of weird. The Power Rangers head over to the pumpkin patch. Then they have pumpkins appear over their heads, and it starts to suffocate them. Then they fight these pumpkin-headed putties, and at that point, they wake up the pumpkin rapper by giving him a bad rap, and he's like, "Oh, this rap is so bad." I can't remember the exact rap that the rhymes he does, and I kind of don't want to tell you because they're just awful. I think you have to hear them for yourselves. All the while this is going on, this kind of the subplot is that Kimberly's fighting or competing against Skull in a kind of Halloween-themed game show about tricking people out of their money or points or something. And yeah, it's quite 90s, I will say that, but it's enjoyable nevertheless. It's a bit of fun, and again, it's only like 17 minutes long, so it's not gonna kill you to watch it. And he does come back. He becomes one of these kind of, like I said, infamous characters. People love him or they loathe him. He's on top 5 best, Power Rangers lists, villains, and top 5 worst as well. So it depends how you feel about him. But I kind of, as awful as he is, I kind of enjoy the awfulness about it. There's not that many, I don't watch Power Rangers. I'm not a massive fan of Power Rangers, but this is the one I remember most as a kid. Like one of the ones I just, there's a few of the characters, the early monsters that I kind of remember more fondly or at all. I might need to go back and kind of do a deep dive of kind of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but when this kind of popped up and I was like, oh my god, yeah, of course, I remember this one now. Bizarre, absolutely bizarre character, bizarre set of skills. He's got some cool powers. He's got like this vine whip thing. He can throw pumpkin bombs. He's got the traps. He can channel electricity. He has like this energy blast as well. So he's got some fairly cool abilities. But there you go. It's one of the more bizarre designs and bizarre kind of antics and personalities and characteristics. But again, he's turned up quite a lot in other media, much like Sarwain or Sam Hain. Just so many different kind of types and kind of, he's almost like a bit of a joke, but he's kind of an enjoyable joke. But that is what it is. But that's it for our list. I hope you enjoyed this, guys. I know I have. I'm just going to throw out a few honourable mentions as well before I go. So we've got Jack the Lantern, and that's from Zenoscope's Grim Fairy Tales, a comic book where that character very much based around the Stingy Jack legend that I was talking about earlier. You've got Naoko Kirino from the Pumpkin Knight manga. He's a kind of a serial killer who wears a pumpkin. Jack-O-Lantern 3 from DC Comics. He's a superhero, but in this version, he's the only one to look like a jack-o'-lantern or have a pumpkin-like visage or costume. Sam, obviously from Trick or Treat from last year. But I just love that movie. So good. Cool, really cool horror character as well. One day I hope they're going to make a decent sequel to that. Fingers crossed they do. I mentioned the Headless Horseman from Legend of Sleepy Hollow. You've got Sarwain again, or Sam Hain, or however you want to pronounce it, from the Hack/Slash comic book series. You've got Lord Pumpkinhead from the Ultraverse comics, and Mervyn Pumpkinhead from the Vertigo Sandman Neil Gaiman series. All really good, all almost made the list. I'm sure there's many more that I haven't mentioned. Please mention them in the comments if you do have any you think of that come to mind. I'd love to know, and tell me why I was wrong. Please tell me why I was wrong. I love to know when I'm wrong. But yes, as always, you know where to find me. So on Facebook, it's @Secret Boars. Twitter, it's at Dan_Balls. Instagram, Spider-Dan Secret Balls. And the podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. And there are previews available on YouTube. And if you'd like to donate towards the podcast, you can buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/SpiderDan and the Secret Balls. And when you interact with us, don't forget to use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle. All right, guys, take care and have a great Halloween.